to talk about Native values, and I would suggest that this, if you're going to take notes, that this be the day that you do it, because this would be really good for storybooks. We're going to talk about values, and the one that we're going to start with is cooperation. We also got, first thing we're going to talk about is cooperation. Cooperation in Indian culture is looked at very, very highly, and it's very, very valued. Cooperation is one of those things that, as far back as you go, cooperation was important because everybody in the village had something to do. And their job or their skill was very, very important because not everybody in the village did a little bit of everything, but people who did things very, very well were actually assigned to do those things. If somebody was a good hunter, for instance, they would hunt pretty much for the village. And if you go up to, it's still very, very common. There's a lot of sharing that goes on on the reservation. And the people who fish well will supply fish to the elders. The people who hunt well will bring meat to the elders, that kind of thing. So cooperation was very, very important and very valued. A long time ago, of course, it was necessary for survival. I mean, it was about survival. If you didn't get that meat for that week or that day or that month, whatever the case might be, you simply, well, you died. So you had to have people who did things very, very well. The idea was to send people out there who did it very, very well to assure that you got what you needed. If you're very, very good at picking a large amount of berries in a day, that's what you did. If you were good at cleaning pelts, that's what you did. If you were good at weaving, that's what you did. If you were a great cook, that's what you did. And everybody in the villages would then have a very, very important role. And when everybody came together, of course, it painted this picture of success, and things got done this way. So cooperation is one of those things that has kind of carried on, too. One of the issues that we have here at USD is the family kind of cooperation. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, but cooperation in taking care of elders is very, very important. The elder gets sick, oftentimes the people from school unfortunately have to go home and end up missing school, that kind of thing. And it's kind of a double-edged sword because the most responsible people are probably the ones that go to school sometimes, but also the ones that have to take care of things at home when things happen at home. But it's all about that kind of cooperation. Educational considerations, a common consequence of the disparity between cooperation and competition is that when a fellow Indian student does not answer a question in class, some Indian students may state that they, too, do not know the answer, even though they do. Indian people generally will not try to outshine other Indian people. This is very, very common. I've been on panels before where I've recognized that some of my colleagues, Native colleagues, have gotten something wrong. You never correct that. And I've gotten something wrong. They'll never correct me. But they'll wait till after. But they'll never do it in front of people. That's just simply not something that's done. Of course, the dominant culture perspective in the antithesis of cooperation is competition. And we've talked about competition a great deal in here. And competition is something that perpetuates the system of capitalism, so the dominant culture is very, very locked in to competition. Businesses go out of business because they can't compete. And that's the way it's supposed to work. You're supposed to continuously make advances in the business world in order to stay in business, and it's kind of a survivalist thing. The weakest are supposed to fall out of the picture. That perspective is not a perspective of Native cultures. It's not a value of Native cultures. There's a lot of security in being a member of a group and not being singled out and placed in a position above or below others. Native people will not place themselves above or below others. As we've talked about a few times now, everybody is sought to be on that even plane, on that medicine wheel, on that even plane. So nobody is supposed to be better than other people. I've already told you the story about telling my chair that when we went to the res, don't call me doctor, and the first thing that he did was call me Dr. Cheeseman, and the meeting was pretty much over. And, I had to go back about a week and a half late, 10 days later, actually, and apologize for that remark. And I didn't even participate in the meeting after that, because we don't set things up that way. You're given status in a community by the community, not by the amount of letters behind your name. And that's something that people really need to look at when they're on the reservation. The notion of cooperation is so strong in many tribal communities that democracy means consent by consensus. Consensus is very, very important. A lot of people will make a few decisions. Usually the final decision, by the way, is made by a woman. I have to tell you that. And even traditionally speaking, so what happens is men will haggle about it, and then the women will make the final decision, most of the time. The concept of group, people take care of each other. You have a responsibility to take care of each other. I mentioned a little bit ago that if grandma and grandpa are sick, you'll often spend the night there just to make sure that everything's okay in the morning. And people don't even balk at it. You just do it. You just do it. There are many times when I've had to stay the night with elders. And, and if they ask you, you just do it. And as a consequence, you miss stuff. If I have to do a funeral, which are a 4-day funeral, as we've discussed before, and it's going to involve missing classes, things like that, my thing is not here, it's there. So we have something set up that if I have to go, that somebody will come in and actually do the class in some way. Today's a good day, right? The difference is living every day to its fullest and not looking ahead, especially if one is not living only to succeed in a monetary sense. Monetary sense. So, the objective in Indian culture is not to see how much money you can accumulate. It's to live a happy life. And we talked a little bit about this in terms of religion. It's not fear of going to hell that you live. It's living a happy life. It's living well while you're here. That's a very, very staunch belief in indigenous cultures. The dominant society perspective, of course, is to prepare for tomorrow. You're always preparing for tomorrow. And Indian people do that too, especially nowadays because of the economic systems that we're forced to live in. I mean, you can't retire and be flat broke and not have a car and all that kind of thing. There are certain necessities that we have to adhere to, but the undercurrent of the culture is to try to hang on to as much of the culture as you can. So you kind of live in the present. One of the things that people have complained to me about, especially my daughters, I was concerned about my future, and I don't know if they're waiting for me to die and grab money or what the deal is. Sometimes I wonder about that. But I tell them that and I'm not the greatest with money. To me, money is to be spent, and as money comes in, it goes out, usually faster than it comes in. I'm not very good with that, and I don't even know why. And most people, Indian people that I know, don't have a sense of like huge savings accounts, playing the stock market, those kinds of things. It's just not something that's really part of indigenous culture. The notion of time. We talked a little bit about time. We're going to talk about a different form of time. We're going to talk about the grid on the wall. To Indian people, that's not time. Time is very, very spiritual. But unfortunately, or fortunately, whatever the case might be, I prefer fortunately, time, the grid of time tells us where we're supposed to be during the day. When I come in the morning and look at my calendar, I get nauseous because it's usually all filled up and I don't have time to do anything, oddly enough, which is incredibly ironic when you think about it. Everything happens for a reason, and you are where you're supposed to be, so you should stop and just smell the roses. However, this notion of Indian time that a lot of Indian people and Indian students will often bring to me and say, Gary, it's Indian time, that's why I'm late for your class every day. Nonsense. That's nonsense. The notion of Indian time has been twisted because Indians were always early. Early, because it was about respect. That notion of being late all the time, that's just because you're late. You're not preparing yourself properly. And let's get real about it. The unfortunate thing about that too is sometimes Indians are way too early. We had a drum group who does a lot of traveling around the world. They stayed at our house one day. They were a week early for a powwow, and they ended up staying at our house. And I got to tell you, the smallest drum member was probably 300, 350 pounds. And I mean, they ate us out of house and home. We spent $1,000 on groceries that week. So I mean, it was like, don't come early anymore, boys. Really. Age. Of course, in the dominant culture, the thing is to look and stay as young as possible. Look at makeup, look at skincare products, look at hair dyes, look at diet products. All that stuff is about trying to look and feel younger. Well, folks, it doesn't work. It's a mask. And that's kind of a shame, because especially the women in our society are kind of getting taken on a daily basis with buying this expensive stuff. And of course, it's but I have to tell you too, that it's not, that whole notion is not the women's fault, because it's perpetuated by the men who insist that women look in this particular way. And I've known women who are so sensitive about it. I know a woman one time, a tragedy actually, one time her husband called her fat, she stopped eating, and she was dead 6 weeks later. So that's how powerful this pull is in this country. And it's sad. We walk down the aisles of Walmart. I mean, it's something. In Indian culture, of course, it's good to grow old. Indian elder women usually won't use hair dye, although I know a lot of women who do now. They use that blue stuff. I don't know what it does. It turns your hair blue. But it's cute. The noble thing to do is to give your possessions away when you grow older. So we've talked about this before. As you grow older, you have a responsibility. My responsibility is to gradually pass things out to my ashkabewis. Remember what the ashkabewis were? They're the people who kind of have asked me for their help. So my obligation is to continue to give them what they need to become more spiritual. Also, we have it kind of all lined up that my oldest son, he's the one pretty much who's supposed to get my stuff. If I die tomorrow, somebody has to take care of that stuff. Everything, by the way, is considered property. The songs that I sing are my spiritual property, right? We don't call it property per se, but for the sake of this course, we do. They're very, very spiritual. They have to go someplace. Somebody has to take care of those songs. Things like that drum back there, that has to go to someone. Everything that you have, your dance outfits. If you die, you just can't let them hang in the closet. They have to go to somebody. And usually you're in communication with elders and things who will take care of that for you, that know where things are supposed to go. My pipe has to go someplace. All my stuff, and I've got a garage full of stuff, has to go someplace. I've got so many Indian blankets that I really, one of these days I'm just going to give them all to somebody. And blankets, by the way, the reason that I've got those blankets is because people give blankets as a gift. And that's a very, very good gift to give, by the way. If you're ever in a position where you need to give a gift, a blanket is a very, very good symbolic gift. So that's always good. And that means that you're taking care of people. You go to see an elder, you're always going to bring tobacco, and what I always do is I always bring a gift. And usually, and a lot of times, the gift is a blanket. Modesty. Modesty is inherent in indigenous cultures. When one does well and achieves something, one must remain very, very modest. You don't brag about it. It's not something that you're never trying to put yourself above somebody else. I mentioned, I think I mentioned this last class about hanging animal heads on the walls and stuff like that. Not something you do. When you construct a powwow outfit, it's not supposed to be flashier than anything else, unless you're a fancy dancer, right? And then it's about flash. And there's spiritual stuff to go with that too. Yes.
So to avoid kind of placing yourself higher than somebody, how do you share your achievements without being I'm better than you? Or is that just something you don't do? If you're to do really well at a test or at a powwow, you just did
That's
excellent.
usually not something that's done.
They just don't do
You
that.
just, yeah, you just don't brag about it.
Okay.
Yep, it's usually not brought up. In fact, when you are teaching, you might have Indian people in your classroom who will not answer a question right and will not raise their hand, because if they do, they're outshining their other people. That's something you're gonna have to be very, very cognizant of. That just may happen. And it's happened to me before in this setting, at this level. Indian people will not try to outshine other Indian people. Boasting out loud, loud behavior, attracting attention to oneself is very, very discouraged. And that's something that you see around here all the time. You don't see a lot of Indian people, especially in South Dakota, it's been my experience, who will jump out and boast about things and be very, very loud and boisterous. In the education realm, Indian people may not even like getting A's on papers. And they may screw stuff up on purpose. I've seen it. Yes?
About competitive sports.
Well, sports is a little bit different because it's a game. Yes?
What if you have a student in your class and you know that they're putting wrong answers or they're doing something wrong on purpose? How do you approach that as a teacher?
You have to kind of talk to them, milk them along the way. The more an Indian person trusts the teacher, the more they're going to relinquish some of that kind of behavior. It's not that the behavior is wrong either,
No.
but it's a matter of building rapport and building trust. And then gradually, those Indian students will start to understand that you have to get better grades. Yes?
So rather than like starting out the year where you give like these tests and a lot of like class discussion, would it be better to do like one-on-one conferences where you can build up that trust and convey like, you know, good
Does this sound
things and-
familiar to anybody? Could be.
That way, you know, like as they start to trust you more, then you can start having those class discussions where they want to participate, or give them the tests that they're
Mhm.
going to want to, you know, excel in, so
Yep.
they do well in school.
Possibly.
That'd be-
Another thing would be to tell them that no one's going to find out about your story. Nobody else will ever know. But again, you hit on something that I was going to talk about during the last section as to why we do the things that we've done in this class. But yeah, you know, if you step back and take a look from the outside in of this class, you can see that we do a tremendous amount of different things that we're going to literally jot out as we go. Okay? Autonomy. Values placed on individual personal autonomy. One is taught to not interfere in the affairs of others. Indians support the right of an individual. One does not volunteer advice unless that person is asked. That is really big. Unless that person is asked. And airing dirty laundry, that's not something that usually happens. It's usually kept in the family. Certainly, it's never aired Indian person to non-Indian person, because it's none of anybody else's business. A lot of Indian people will not go to counseling because of that unless it's an Indian counselor. When I was doing foster care, we had a huge issue with that. And we wouldn't take our kids to non-Indians because they wouldn't talk. Calmness. Quietness and the ability to remain still is heavily valued. There are times to just shut the hell up. Don't talk for the sake of being heard or for the sake of hearing yourself. I've got a friend who's probably my best friend. We could sit and watch a football game and not say a word. However, we're communicating the whole time. Just by being there. You don't have to talk all the time. Silence is comfort. Most Indians have few nervous mannerisms. And that's something that holds true. Indians are very kind of laid-back people, in general. I know some pretty high-strung Indian people, too. Life comes, we live it, and life goes. Feelings of discomfort are frequently masked in silence and to avoid embarrassment of others. When ill at ease. Indian people will go out of their way to make other people feel comfortable. That's I see that a lot. Indian people will go out of their way to make other people feel comfortable. Very, very hospitable. You go into an Indian household, the first thing you know, you're sitting at the table and you're eating fry bread and all this other stuff that'll kill you in 2 years. I love fry bread, unfortunately. But I wanted to say this about fry bread. Fry bread is not an Indian food. Fry bread is an Indian food, but it's not an Indian food. Fry bread came from the commodities, right? The government surplus. You got a big bag of flour. You got a big block of lard. Well, what the hell do you do with flour and lard? You make fry bread, right? You want good healthy foods, Indian foods. It's one of the things about the student group here, when they do these fry bread things, and they should do them because they raise money, right? But why not have some like wild rice soup? And now I'm hungry. I'm usually hungry. Why not have, yeah, why not have some walleye or some venison that's very, very low fat, fresh vegetables, those kinds of things. Indian people made all kinds of bean soups. Lots of berries used in Indian foods, lots of nuts, usually very, very healthy. So it kind of drives me crazy when we think of fry bread as an Indian food. Passion, Indian people generally are very passionate people. And sometimes the passion is mistaken for anger, especially with me, right? And it drives me nuts. I talked about this earlier in the semester. I think the second lecture we talked about this. I have stood in front of audiences who, when I get passionate about something, because let's face it, time's running out. If we don't start making some changes, I'm not going to be able to do it because I'm going to get too old. I mean, seriously. And there is this sense of urgency. I mean, we want a decent life and we want it now before it's too late. We deserve that. So, I mean, you get passionate and people, Gary, you're angry. Come to us when you're less angry and we'll listen. It's like modesty. When one does well and achieves something, one must remain modest. We talked a little bit about that already. Patience. Patience. Which leads me to my next story. We go on fast, right? And when we go on fast, we go in the middle of nowhere, up in Lake of the Woods, which is a giant lake. And it's unbelievably beautiful. But my island that I fast on is 30 miles out. It's called Eagle Island. The reason it's called Eagle Island is because there's a set of bald eagles that come back to the same place, husband and wife. Eagles marry forever. And if a husband or wife dies, an eagle will not go with another eagle. They're very, very, very loyal. So the old man's trotting us out, setting us all on our own islands. They're all far away from each other. We have no contact. Finally, we get to Eagle Island. The old man says, Gary, I want you to remember this. Don't go on the side of the island where the eagle's nest is. And the island is probably no bigger than maybe 4 times this class. Maybe it's the size of the Edna, right? All total. It's a very small island. Then there's a bay. Then there's even a smaller island across, about twice the size of this room. So he drops me off, and I usually bring a sleeping bag, and I try not to sleep in it, but you know, when you get older, you're back. If you're sleeping on the ground, that's why I don't like camping anymore. Camping for me is the Holiday Inn in Ramada. But so I get my stuff out, which is very, very few things. My bundle, things like that. And he says, remember not, as he's driving away, remember not to go by the eagles. What's the first thing Gary does? Walks over and starts looking at the eagles, and the eagles they get upset, right? And by the way, that sound that you hear, that's not an eagle. That's a red-tailed hawk. Eagles chirp like robins. That's exactly what an eagle sounds like. So all the westerns and stuff where you hear that eagle sound, that's all nonsense. Those are red-tailed hawks. So the eagles are getting very anxious, so I said, okay, maybe. And on the way back, I stop and I turn around and I'm looking at them, and they're still looking at me going, what in the hell are you doing 30 miles from nowhere? And so I put my tobacco down and I asked the eagles, I'll stay away from you if you give me some kind of gift, right? Pretty selfish, but that's what you do. So on the 4th day, I get up and I have no food, no water, right? Surrounded by fresh water that's drinkable, might I add. And the island is rocky, so I'm hopping back over there on the rocks, you know, and I'm being extremely careful because if Gary falls and hits his head, it's probably over, right? There's no help out there. So I get there, and funny thing is, I'm looking out, moose is swimming across over here. And then I look the other way, and a bear is swimming across over here. And bears are cute when they swim, because they're like in a state of constant panic. And you don't think about that when you think about bears. The moose are very, very smooth. They almost trot. But it's cool, because right when I get over there, Mama Eagle takes off around the back of the nest, about this far off the water, and you can see the ripples on the water, because these are powerful birds. Comes up onto the tree, flaps to land on top of the dead tree on that little island, and all of a sudden, a fletching falls in the water. And I'm like, whoa, because eagle feathers are huge. And I'm going to explain the eagle feather in a different class. Eagle feathers are huge. If you receive an eagle feather, especially from an eagle directly, holy crap, I mean, that's huge. So I see that eagle feather in the water, and it's about this big, right? It's huge, giant. These eagles are eating well out there. And I'm thinking, I can swim across there and get that, even though we're not supposed to touch water. I'm still thinking, but it's May, and a homie ain't gonna swim across there, I'm sorry. And the wind is blowing from the little island to the big island, which means eventually that feather could get here. And I sensed that I should wait. I made the right decision. I waited all day long. And I figured it was probably about 9 or 10 hours for that feather to finally get, and I mean, it was right there at one point. And the island ended. It was kind of floating this way, and the island, I mean, it ended here, and I thought, oh, maybe I should get it before it floats right by me. And I did, and I waited and waited and waited. And I'll tell you, that was the greatest lesson in patience that I ever got in my life. If you wait, then things will come. And I was able to get that giant eagle feather. It was nice. And that night, we went into the sweat lodge, and I didn't tell anybody about it. The old man knew I got it. He had a vision that I got it. The indifference to work ethic. Historically, little need existed to work just for the sake of working. That's busy work. You notice we don't do busy work in this class? All of a sudden things are starting to come together a little bit. I don't insist that you do busy work. In education departments, have you do busy work up the butt. And I'm dead serious about that, not in my classes. Indians always worked pragmatically. It was to meet the needs. You work when you had to. And leisure is important. And believe it or not, if you go anywhere else in the world, except this country, you get months of vacation, and it's emphasized that on your job, you take some leisure time. And guess what? Statistically, you're a much, 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 much better worker. People wonder why I take a nap occasionally in my office. It's so I can get my work done better. Because when I'm tired, it's a waste of time. I gotta go back and do crap over. And I gotta tell you that I'm somewhat of a perfectionist. That's part of my issue. Moderation in speech, we talked about that. You don't talk for the sake of talking. Lying, you don't lie. Careful listening. Maybe the most important thing, and a thing that, again, if you're starting to pay attention now, you're seeing this built into the structure of this class. Listening is very important. Listening to the stories. Careful listening. Children are not supposed to talk, they're supposed to listen. It's not that children should be seen and not heard. That's not what we're talking about. But children have an obligation around ceremonies, around elders. I mean, that sounds kind of harsh. It's not something I directly tell my kids, but you have to listen. Because that's where the wisdom is, man. I mean, it makes sense to me. Gary, shut up and listen. Storytelling. Huge. Huge, huge, huge. By the way, we're going to have a storytelling class that you'll be able to take. If you've got any electives or anything, storytelling class. Over the past couple semesters, one of the reasons why I'm going to be doing it is because students are requesting it. And we think we can probably fill that class. So, storytelling class. Remember that. Look for it. Careful observation. Many Indians are very observational. Observational learning style. Observational learning style. Observational learning style. Observational learning style. You have to say it again? We're going to get back. Somebody said, uh-huh. So we're going to get back to that a little bit later. But a lot of Indian people are very observational. Let me see what I need to do, and then I'll do it. We talked a little bit about the orientation of the present. There really isn't a future, there isn't the past. It's the present that expands in all ways. So we're constantly expanding ourselves. How? Pragmatically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. Pragmatism. Most American Indians are very pragmatic people. Indians tend to speak in terms of concrete rather than abstract. I don't think that's true. This is the one thing that I'll disagree with them on. I think Indian people are incredibly abstract thinkers, but I also think they're able to convert that abstract into the practical. I'm a very abstract thinker at times. I think, and this is the thing. Has anybody here ever heard of synesthesia? I'm a synesthesiac. I'll let you in on that right now. One of the reasons why I had it explained to me my IQ is so high is because I think conceptually. I think in circles. And you see it every single lecture. This story leads to this story, leads to this story, leads to this story, leads to this story. Then bam, we're back at that story again. Everything eventually makes sense. The class as a whole is run the same way. We're going to get back to the first class we've had in here. Everything relates to something. Everything is tied in. You may not realize it, but this class is incredibly sophisticated when you step back and look at it. It's everything that I say in here means something. Everything is connected to something. Everything that I do has a reason behind it. Believe me, and especially when we get into this last section, is when I start breaking it down for you, because I want to pass that on to you so you can use that in your knowledge of teaching. And you're going to understand at that point, things will, all of a sudden, the light bulbs are going to go off. Respect of nature. A lot of people, Indian people in particular, are very, very at the forefront of nature because of the cyclical connection to spirituality. Nature is very, very spiritual. If you see things, you see them for a reason. If you're walking and you see a squirrel, if you're walking and you see a rabbit, our teachings are that you stop and think about what you're thinking about and think about the meaning of the thing that you're looking at and thinking about, if that makes any sense. It's constantly thinking and reflecting back to your spirituality, bringing your spirituality across the emotional, the intellectual, back into the pragmatic so you can help understand your reason for living. And we talked about the creation story. Indian people have a very definite Mother Earth vegetation, four-legged, two-legged way of thinking. Not the way the dominant culture thinks about it. Very, very, it's at the heart of a lot of conflict and a lot of understanding. Spirituality, Indians hold a contemplative rather than a utilitarian philosophy of spirituality. It's inside of us. It's individual, not congregation. The spiritual aspects are introduced into all areas of one's life. Much emphasis is placed on the mystical aspects of life. I've told you a couple stories about this. So you've got a couple instances of that, the connections, the path that people have in life, the notion that everybody is in one place for a reason. Why over time are we all here, right now? We could have been born at any time. We could have been born in the future. We could have been born in the past. We could have been born in a different state, in a different town, in a different country. We could be going to a different school. There's reasons behind those things, not coincidences, reasons. People write stuff off and say it's coincidence all the time. We don't believe in those kind of things. The importance of cultural pluralism. Indians resist assimilation but emphasize cultural pluralism. In the face of total extinction, Indian people desire to retain as much of their cultural heritage as possible. And I think in here I may have drawn that circle on the board and showed you that even though you may not think so, I live a very, very small portion of my life in my traditional life because I don't have a choice. It's not here. I didn't grow up hearing that Indian people are even good people. We were always the bad guys, always. There were no Indian teachers, there were no Indian people around me, no role models. So we had to find our way and come to the realizations ourselves. And that's a heck of a burden, especially when you live in a world that thinks you're nothing, or thinks you're, in fact, less than nothing and being the bad guy on the other side of the line. And I'll tell you that there was 2 movies that made a major breakthrough. The first movie was a great movie. It was called Thunderheart. I don't know if anybody's seen that. By the way, if you want to see that movie, it's an excellent movie. It's entertaining as heck. Val Kilmer movie. It's called Thunderheart. It was a movie in the 1970s. That was the first time that I ever saw Indian people in a positive light in any kind of media. Any kind. Then, of course, there was the movie that I don't really care for, Dances with Wolves. However, what that movie did is that made Indians the good guys, right? And it finally broke the ice. It finally broke the ice and opened the door to a different realm of thinking. Before that movie, there was no exceptions. Indians are the bad guys. They're enemies of the state. They fought our cavalry over and over. We just heard everything about it. Remember the Indians attacking the wagon trains, right? But the first part of the story isn't there. You're on our land. What happens if somebody comes in your backyard? Are you going to protect it? If somebody comes into your house, are you going to protect it? Somebody's sitting in your car when you leave today. What are you going to do? Right? Avoidance of eye contact. This is going to be huge for you because when you get into your classrooms, Indian people aren't going to look you in the eyes. And it's about respect. When Indian people aren't looking you in the eyes, it's about respect because Indian people are taught growing up over and over and over again that you don't look elders in the eyes. Even when when Indian people come in for the conferences, the eyes are down here, the eyes are up here, an occasional eye contact, just so they're letting you know that they're there, right? But teachers who don't know this will think that Indian people are being disrespectful because they're not making all this eye contact. And this is something I've really had to work hard on. You know, and I felt the cane from the old women when I made too much eye contact. And of course, in this class, it's part of, it's important because it's part of the process of assessment. I have to look into my students' eyes to see how quickly they look away, because that's an assessment technique. If you're looking away quick, it might mean that there's an issue, right? Bilingualism. Most Indian people I know speak very good, or speak English very well. I almost told you that in Minnesota. Indian people talk good. But a lot of language on the reservation is what we call broken English. Sometimes it's difficult to understand. A lot of Indian people will tail off high, almost question-like, when ending a sentence. It's something that's very common in the Midwest, kind of thing. Indian people will tend to fluctuate tone as they're talking, because in indigenous languages, you fluctuate tone. And even if you don't know a lick of your own language, it's inherent. Caution in personal encounters. I got to tell you, many Indian people will avoid contact with people who they don't feel comfortable with a passion. Now here's one of the issues that I face, right? If I see students like in Walmart, and I got to tell you that it seems like half of the ed school seems to work at Walmart. Every time I go in there, I can't avoid students in this town. Now when I was in St. Cloud, when I was in Minneapolis, I never had to see my students. And there was a very clear distinction between that. Here it's not possible. You see your students everywhere, which makes it very difficult. When I see students, I'll sometimes, if I spot them first, I'll kind of move away, right? But that's not necessarily because I'm a professor student, it's because I'm an Indian person. And the other thing is people, if they see you in Walmart, will tend to want to make meaningless conversation with you. Right? Today it's beautiful outside, right? I can't wait to get outside. I'm going to break out my Speedo and I'm going to scare the squirrels away. Actually, no. But it usually gets a cheap The American ideal, remember, is to always kind of be friendly. Like this is, my partner and I have this problem. She's very out. If she sees somebody in Walmart, she'll run across the floor to greet them. And I'm like, so, I mean, yeah. So if you see me in Walmart and and you feel like talking to me, that's all fine, right? Over in the month, you see me, that's all fine. But if you also see me going, no, you know that I ain't in the mood to talk.
Just keep trying.
Just keep trying.